when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
Jameson Williams has been so impressive these last couple of weeks.
What's going on, draft fans? Welcome back to Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast. I'm your host, Russell Brown, here on a Sunday, a scenario Sunday, that is. Something that we did last year a little bit. Going to bring it back this year as we head towards the 2022 NFL Draft. Lots of exciting things to get into from just the Thursday live show, which if you haven't checked out yet, go over to YouTube, search Cover One, and go down to the NFL Draft tab that we have, and you'll find all the NFL Draft videos that I've put together, that Eric Turner's put together, and the team over at Cover One. But we'll be doing kind of a weekly Cover One NFL Draft show, a live show where you guys can interact with us over on YouTube. So it's a lot of fun. We broke down my first mock draft, which if you haven't seen that, you can head over to cover1.net. You'll find it there, or you can find it pinned on my Twitter account on my homepage of my profile at Russ NFL Draft. So be sure to smash the follow button. Check out the mock draft. Give me your thoughts in regards to the bad picks, the good picks, your favorite team, your least favorite pick, your least favorite team, all of that good stuff. So be sure to do that. And of course, you have to find the Cover One NFL Draft Podcast on any streaming platform of where you get your podcast. So Spotify, Apple Podcast, Spreaker, wherever you get it, search Cover One NFL Draft Podcast. Be sure to rate and review this show here. So it's a Sunday. Last night was a long day as far as doing a bunch of radio stuff. Was on CBS Sports National Radio last night. Not my first time, but it was a big time moment for me being on the air with Jody McDonald, who, people always just view me as like this Metro Detroit guy, and that's fine. That's where I live, and I listen to a lot of Detroit sports, but I've spent a lot of time in my life listening to WFAN, The Fan in New York, and I listened to Jody McDonald when I used to work a night shift job. And so when I did that, back 10, 11 years ago, and I was able to listen to him, it obviously made life a lot easier working nights. But then getting an opportunity to talk with him last night was really a humbling experience, and it was great being able to break down, the 2022 NFL Draft, the Combine, some of the teams, some of the players. It was a lot of fun. He and I will be reconnecting here in the coming weeks to do it again on CBS Sports National Radio. So be sure to check that out on the Odyssey app, on Odyssey.com, or again with the Odyssey app using the Odyssey Rewind function that they have. It was a fun 15-20 minutes that we were able to talk, and I hope it brought some joy to the people working those night shift jobs or those that stay up late to listen to Jody talk a little bit of sports. So we're going to do our own version of that today here on the podcast. We're going to do Scenario Sunday. So if you've never been a part of a Scenario Sunday, sometimes I break down a specific team, what they need to do. But in regards to this, I'm going to be breaking it down into basically 4 teams. And I'm going to just go in order down the draft board. And obviously free agency will change some of these things potentially. But beyond that, there's a lot of different things to get into. So I think with about 8-9 weeks until we get to the draft, we should be able to get through all 32 teams, at least in the first round, and maybe rather than talking about, Detroit at 32, maybe I'll talk a little bit about the Rams when we get to 32. Rather than, talking about potentially Philadelphia multiple times, maybe we'll talk about, Miami, Indianapolis, so that way I can talk about San Francisco and obviously the Jets at 4. Maybe we'll talk briefly today about them at 10, those types of things. So today is going to be picks 1 through 4, Jacksonville, Detroit, Houston, and the New York Jets. And we're going to just break down some prospects that they could look into, maybe what their cap space looks like, and then ultimately maybe what their depth chart looks like, and maybe some pending free agents. So for starters, we've got Jacksonville. And Jacksonville's such an interesting team because Urban Meyer, what a bad hire that was. Really just didn't work out from the get-go. The only positive of having Urban Meyer is that he didn't mess up the Trevor Lawrence pick. It's not like he wrote the wrong name down on the ticket or on the name card there. So they've got a bright future in regards to that, but they've got some question marks up on their offensive line that I don't think a lot of people realize. Now, they've got upwards close to, I think it's $55 million in cap space here, but the big free agent that's pending for them is Cam Robinson, the left tackle. He, made $13.5, almost $14 million. His market value, according to SpotRack.com, is close to $17 million. That would put him in the range of Garrett Bowles, DJ Humphries, Laramie Tunzel, of kind of that age range of when they were at 25, 26 years of age. So Cam Robinson's going to probably have a market out there for somebody. In Jacksonville, they kind of know what he is. Not a great player, not a bad player, but he's going to hit the market, and I would be surprised if he was back. I really would, because the big money that they might have to spend is at guard. A.J. Cann and Andrew Norwell are free agents. Now, Norwell could potentially sign elsewhere. There's no question about it. I mean, he played at Carolina for a little bit, started his career there, goes to Jacksonville, and, he's made his money there. But if he feels like at this point in his career, if they're not going anywhere, maybe, just maybe, Andrew Norwell is going to say, you know what, I'm going to go play somewhere else. Maybe that's Buffalo. Maybe that's Green Bay. Maybe that's, San Francisco. I'm going to go somewhere where maybe I could win a championship. And if he doesn't feel like Jacksonville's the answer, then obviously they'll have to figure that out. But A.J. Cann, he's an interesting one. He is 30, but he's getting to that point where maybe he's going to potentially get the biggest contract of his career. And again, maybe he doesn't, it's hard to say what he's, going to get from a market value standpoint, but, making close to $6 million this past year, could he be somewhere in that similar range? Sure. And outside of that, I mean, they got to sign Taven Bryan if they want to keep him. Trey Herndon in the corner if they want to keep him. Nevin Lawson the other corner. They've got a couple of receivers there: Taven Austin, DJ Chark, Laquan Treadwell. And obviously, Chark is the big one. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? That's always tough. I mean, he's going to probably have close to $12 million coming his way on the market value side of things, the average. So could he sign elsewhere? Very possible. And if he does, the Jaguars are going to have a big problem offensively. So the prospects that make sense for them at one are the obvious choices, right? Defensively, you have Aiden Hutchinson and Kayvon Thibodeau. And it makes sense if they go that route. It really does. I mean, don't get me wrong. It makes a ton of sense if they want to go with one of, the two of the best defensive players in the draft in Hutchinson and Thibodeau. It's more so pick your flavor. Which guy do you want? Me personally, I think the best player in the draft is Hutchinson. But, a few years ago, they drafted Josh Allen. Could they take a Hutchinson or Kayvon and put them opposite? Absolutely they could. But I just wouldn't be surprised if, the common theme that we're talking about here, 3 offensive linemen, a big receiver in DJ Chark, I just think that this team is going to really look at the offensive line position. And the safe pick in regards to this is Evan Neal, the left tackle out of Alabama. So I think that's the guy that's probably near the top of their board. And I think he's somebody that you bring in. It helps you justify protecting Trevor Lawrence. It helps you give assurance that Trevor Lawrence is your guy. And if that's the case, I don't think anybody can really bat an eye or think twice like that's a bad pick. Evan Neal's a safe pick. He can play the left side. He can play the right side. I mean, you're losing Cam Robinson. Sure, you have Walker Little, but if you told me Walker Little or Evan Neal, I'm taking Evan Neal because you do have Jawan Taylor on the other side. Sure, you could potentially lose Andrew Norwell. You could bring back A.J. Cann. You did draft Ben Barch, who, it has some promise there. But, they've got to figure some things out on the offensive line. You have some young guys, but the sure thing in this draft at left tackle is Evan Neal. So I would be, if I had to bet on it today, that would be my guy in my mock draft 1.0. That's who I have them taking, and obviously we'll see what happens. So that's Jacksonville at 1. We'll get when we get closer to the draft, we'll break them down in the second round of potentially what they could do. Is it a receiver? Is it a defensive lineman there? But Evan Neal just makes a lot of sense. Detroit at 2. So obviously everybody knows I'm a Lions fan. There's no secret there. But I don't care what they do here. Just don't force your hand at a quarterback unless you know for sure. But I don't think there's a sure thing at quarterback. I think Desmond Ridder is somebody that could play as a rookie if you needed him to. I think Kenny Pickett's the best quarterback of the bunch, maybe the safer of the bunch. But there's a lot of upside with Malik Willis. There's plenty of intrigue, with Matt Corral. If you can get him away from a one-read offense, can he show Case the ability to go through progressions? Sam Howell, put some weapons around him. Is he the quarterback that we saw 2 years ago, or is he just kind of regressed and is the guy that he is now? So I don't think quarterback's in the conversation at 2. Maybe at 32. Maybe it's one of those names I mentioned. But the name at number 2 would be Aiden Hutchinson for me, if I was making that pick. I mean, they are in a position where they have not really had a consistent pass rush for many years outside of this past year. Now, this past year was very promising. There was a lot of things that looked really good. And the big fish in this pond for them is Trey Flowers, because his cap hit is close to $24 million. It's like 23.5. They only have $21 million in cap space. And, he's on the books. If they let him go, they're going to clear up almost $11 million in cap space. So you could go from 21 to 32. He would still, again, count against your books for this year, next year, but you at least would be clearing up space on a player that, let's just be honest, is not the guy that you thought he was going to be. Now, they don't have a bunch of big contracts that they have to worry about, like re-signing guys. Like Nick Williams, he's probably gone. Tim Boyle, probably gone. But Jalen Reeves-Maybin, Charles Harris, Alex Anzalone, Josh Reynolds, Khalif Raymond. Those are probably the 5 biggest free agents that they have outside of Tracy Walker. Now, they'll have to figure that whole thing out. They will obviously have to figure out, do they want to keep a guy like Evan Brown, who stepped in and played pretty well at times? Matt Nelson 2 years ago looked like a pretty decent swing tackle. They've got some things that they've got to figure out contract-wise. But again, it's nothing crazy. Like, it's not Cam Robinson. It's not Andrew Norwell like we saw with the Jaguars. Granted, the Lions only have $21 million in cap space. They're going to have to make, some adjustments here. Could Big V take a pay cut? Could we see Jared Goff take a pay cut? I mean, the guy's making $31 million. He's not worth $31 million. We know that. So is there a spot here where the Lions could go from having $21 million to maybe close to 40? Absolutely, they could. They can definitely make some things happen. But the biggest free agent for them, again, Tracy Walker, Alex Anzalone, Jalen Reeves-Maybin, those guys make a lot of sense. And then probably just one of those pass catchers, Reynolds, Raymond. Maybe they get them both back at cheap deals. They're both 27. I'm not too worried about that stuff. What I'm worried about is getting a piece defensively where you start putting fear in the other teams. Because whenever the Lions took the field defensively, sure, they made some nice stops at times, but it felt like at any given time, teams were scoring at will. So at 2, I think you can make a case for Aiden Hutchinson, best pass rusher in the draft, really good length, a really good blend of speed and power, somebody that has a relentless motor that you just love to see. And then obviously with Kayvon, how can you not be excited about Kayvon Thibodeau? There's so much upside to his game at 6'5", 260, and you see a lot of stuff within his game as far as speed to power, that ability to translate it. I think he's got really good instincts in the run game at times. But again, his motor can run hot and cold, and that's my biggest issue. And I think part of that is because he was hurt this past year. I give him credit for playing through injuries. So again, as a Lions fan, if they ended up with Aiden or Kayvon, I really wouldn't mind which one it is. Just take one of those guys and move forward. If they went with the long shot, again, I think the quarterback would potentially be that thing, but I think the long shot would probably be potentially trading down to maybe Carolina. Maybe Carolina wants to move up and ensure that they get their quarterback. But beyond that, I mean, Kyle Hamilton would probably be the only outside choice as he is, one of the 5 best players in this draft, 6'4", 220, incredibly gifted athlete, can do a variety of things. We mentioned Tracy Walker could be gone, and when you just look at this team's overall depth chart at safety, I mean, at times the secondary was so bad you had Will Harris playing corner. I mean, A.J. Parker's a nice UDF find. Ifeatu Melifonwu, played well at times. Amani O played really well. He had 5 interceptions. But, Dean Marlowe probably gone. Tracy Walker could be gone. They could have a need at safety, a bigger need. But the value at safety comes, it just feels like later in the draft at, maybe pick 34 or 66. Maybe at 34 they can get Jaquan Brisker. Maybe at 66, down the draft board. Maybe they can take a Cam Taylor-Britt and move him to safety. I mean, you just never know. But with the Lions, those are the 3 guys. It's got to be defense. It's got to be Kayvon, Aiden, or Kyle Hamilton at 2. The safety might be a little rich for some at 2, and I would agree there. But I love Kyle Hamilton, and I would be fine with the Jets at 4 taking him. So why wouldn't I be okay with the Lions at 2? Passing on a pass rusher though would be tough. I feel like those are safer picks. And then again, just at 32, you have to look at wide receiver. Jahan Dotson makes a lot of sense for them if he's there. Drake London, Treylon Burks, bigger receivers, if they're there, it would make a lot of sense. And then just an outside chance, going secondary. I mentioned Brisker, Jaquan Brisker, maybe Daxton Hill, the safeties there at 34. They could be an option at 32 as well. I do love the thought, though, of Kyler Gordon, the cornerback from Washington. I mean, I know that sounds rich, but man, he's a baller. He's become one of my favorite players in this draft process. Love the way he closes. I think he'd be a great asset to play in the slot. He could play outside, do a lot of different things. I like the way he tackles. I like his aggressive style of play, and I just think the Lions would be really beneficial. It would really benefit the Lions to take a player like that at 32 or 34. So we'll see what they do there at 2, 32, but we move forward to the Houston Texans, who, I mean, do they have the confidence in Davis Mills? I mean, that's the question, right? Like, Deshaun Watson, he's gone. He's not playing another snap for them. That's been evident. I would be stunned if that happened. But is their quarterback really going to be Davis Mills moving forward? Do they go out and bring in like a Teddy Bridgewater? Do they, is Tyrod Taylor potentially that guy again for them that they bring in? I mean, just the injury concerns over the years. Davis Mills didn't play terrible as a rookie, so it would make sense if that was their guy and they just try to build this thing up. I could understand that. I would respect that. So when you look at it, I mean, Kayvon or Aiden Hutchinson make the most sense at 3 for them because of just how bad their pass rush has been since they got rid of Jadeveon Clowney. Now, Clowney wasn't a world beater for them, but he was somebody that offensive linemen had to honor, offenses had to scheme and key around, and they don't have that defensively. I mean, in the back half of their secondary, the player would be, Justin Reed. That would make, the most sense of, hey, don't throw in his direction, right? Like, I'm not gonna have this guy in the area of what I'm going to be doing. But on the defensive line, Jacob Martin could be gone. The last 3 years, 2 out of the last 3 years, they've ranked in the bottom 7 in the NFL as far as generating pressure and getting after the quarterback. You can't live with that. But, Justin Reed set to become a free agent. There's a lot of one-year deals here. They're going to have to figure some things out. There's a lot of guys that could be gone. Eric Wilson, Christian Kirksey at linebacker, Desmond King, Justin Britt. I mean, there's a lot. There is a lot that they have to figure out. And, they have only almost $20 million in cap space. So the Texans might be bad for a while. I mean, they've got a $40 million cap hit on a quarterback that's not even taking a snap for them. Laramie Tunsil's making 26. Brandon Cook's making 16. Eric Murray's making 7. I mean, everybody else it's low money, but you just don't have anything else because there's so much dead cap on the books over the years. And there's some really boneheaded decision-making that came from Bill O'Brien in a previous regime. So they've got to fix it. They've got Pep Hamilton. They've got Lovie Smith. I do like what they have from a coaching perspective, But they've just got to get the right piece here at 3. And with the defensive-minded coach, again, Kayvon or Aiden Hutchinson make a lot of sense. Now, if Justin Reid doesn't come back, you could make that case for Kyle Hamilton. Again, a 6'4", 220-pound safety. I'm all for that. Outside of that, I mean, I don't know if they would pull the trigger on a linebacker, let's say like a Devin Lloyd or an Nakobe Dean. I think it might be a little rich at 3 to take a linebacker there, but I could understand if they fell in love with a Devin Lloyd because of what he provides for a defense. Very versatile, can rush the passer, can play in the box, can go curl to flats. He can do those responsibilities in zone coverage. So I completely understand if they went in that direction. But I think the picks that make the sense there for them is the edge rushers. And they should get their pick of Aiden Hutchinson or Kayvon Thibodeau. Now, again, if it goes Hutchinson 1, Kayvon 2, do they take an Evan Neal? I think they do. But again, you do have Laramie Tunsil there, but you could let him go or move him, and he would only be about, he would be $26 million in dead cap money this year, but $8 million next year. But you could also, you could flirt with the idea of Evan Neal potentially maybe playing right tackle and Laramie Tunsil playing right tackle or vice versa, whatever it is. I mean, Charlie Heck was starting there at one point this year for them. So they can get better on the offensive line either way. So those are options. And that would bring up the next player for them as well, Ikem Ekwonu, offensive tackle for NC State. And we'll go to the next team to talk about Ikem Ekwonu because we're going to move forward to the New York Jets here at 4. We'll talk briefly about them at 10. But the Jets are so interesting, man. They really are because they have Mekhi Becton. They took him in the first round a couple years ago. Then they took Zach Wilson. But Becton has missed 14 of the possible 29 career games that he's been eligible to play in. He's coming off a dislocated right knee. The injuries are a concern. Let's just call it what it is. I mean, it's concerning. And I would be surprised if Evan Neal was here at this point. Maybe he is. If he is, I think that's your guy. But if it's not, I think Ikem Ekwonu from NC State, the 6'4", 320 offensive tackle, makes a lot of sense. I think he's a starting left tackle. I think he does a really good job as a zone blocker. He's one of the best finishers in this draft. I think he is somebody that could come in for the Jets and play that left tackle role. You could look at Mekhi Becton back at the right tackle spot if you need to. Maybe you find a relatively cheap swing tackle. They do have close to $45 million in cap space to play with the Jets. So, again, it would make sense. I mean, really, the big free agents you have to worry about would be, do you want to bring back Morgan Moses, Marcus May, Jamison Crowder? I mean, outside of that, you're not really paying much else out there. Jared Davis, would you want to bring him back? But we'll get into the linebacker spot here at 10 in a minute. So at 4, Ikem Ekwonu, I think that would make a lot of sense. Kyle Hamilton, I think would make a lot of sense for them. Just, again, because I don't know if, they want to pay Marcus May $8 to $9 million a year, maybe even $10 or $11 million a year. When you look at comparable contracts at this age, you're falling into that, probably $8 to $9 million range. I highly doubt he gets Eddie Jackson type money, who was making, he signed a 4-year deal at 27 and got, almost $15 million. I highly doubt that's the case for Marcus May. But crazier things have happened. But Kyle Hamilton makes sense, and I get it. Like, Jets fans are like, oh, no, we're scarred because of Jamal Adams. Well, Jamal Adams was a good player for you on the field. But also, Jamal Adams is the reason why you have the 10th overall pick in this year's draft. So there was a value, there was an asset there by having a player like Jamal Adams. You can replace a Jamal Adams with another safety that's very talented in his own right in Kyle Hamilton. So those two players, Ekwonu, Hamilton, make a ton of sense for the Jets at 4. But moving beyond that, again, I think a linebacker would make sense for them. I could see them falling in love with a David Ajabo or potentially a Jermaine Johnson, and 4 might be rich for some people, but if that's the edge rusher that they want and they feel like that they need, then I think you go and you get that guy, because I feel like, you're bringing back Carl Lawson off a torn Achilles. You don't know what he's going to be. You just don't know. And you could be in a really tough spot where you're not getting after the quarterback. And I think this is something where they need to really focus on that. So that would make a lot of sense at 4. At 10, just briefly, like I mentioned, a linebacker would make a lot of sense. I think this is a potential landing spot for Devin Lloyd at 10, just because he's kind of a longer, versatile linebacker that maybe Saleh could to find some value in. When you look at like his overall height and weight, kind of comparable to Fred Warner in a sense, despite kind of different play styles. But you find some of these athletic linebackers in the San Francisco defense over the years. I think Robert Saleh could maybe find some comparables when he's watching Devin Lloyd, but he could fall in love with a Nakobe Dean as well. Great kid off the field, 6 foot, 225. You're hoping he checks in a hair over 230 just to kind of shut people up. But outside of that, pass catcher is a need. They have to get a receiver in here at some point. I know, Denzel Mims is there. I get it as far as they signed Corey Davis, but that's not the above all be all. You have to go and get another guy. And if Jamison Crowder isn't coming back, again, that's very possible, because Jamison Crowder is 28 years of age. Who knows as far as how many years he's going to keep playing, but Spotrac.com has it he's going to make close to $12 million this year. He's going to make Tim Patrick, Corey Davis type money. Are the Jets really going to pay Crowder a Corey Davis contract when they already have a Corey Davis contract on the books? It's hard to say. So at 10, could they be the team that pulls the trigger on the wide receiver position first? They absolutely could. And if they do, I don't know which one it's going to be, because I have such a hard time figuring out who's going to be the first receiver off the board. But if they do, Treylon Burks makes sense at 6'3", 225, just from a size and speed perspective. But from an overall playmaker perspective, you could look at Jameson Williams, because he's got such great speed. Chris Olave is such a natural route runner and might be one of the safest receivers in this draft, because what you see is what you get, and it's really consistent. He's such a natural route runner and a really good pass catcher. Beyond that, Drake London, 6'5", 210. I think we'd be talking about him more in the top 15 had he had not got hurt. And then obviously Garrett Wilson at 6 foot, 192. Really good body control. Actually a lot better of a route runner than he gets credit for. So the Jets are a wild card, because, again, you have a young quarterback. You could add some pieces offensively from a left tackle and a receiver at 4 and 10, and then just do work for the rest of the draft. Picks 35, 38, 69 on your defense. There's a lot that they can do. So it's not like they have to pigeonhole themselves to one specific position, one specific side of the football. They could mix and match all weekend long on the 2022 NFL Draft. But I think those are the things that make the most sense for the New York Jets. We'll obviously see what happens when we get to the draft. And free agency will obviously tell a lot of the signs of what to expect. And we'll be getting into free agency here in the coming weeks. But in the next 9 or 10 days, we've got the NFL Scouting Combine. And we're going to talk about that later this week, probably Tuesday. Tuesday night we'll probably do a show, talk a little bit about it here on the audio side of things. And then obviously Thursdays are going to be the live YouTube shows. So that's Scenario Sunday. Again, be sure to find the Cover One YouTube page, subscribe to that, and follow me on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft, so you can get kind of the live updates of when we're going to be going live on YouTube. We're shooting between like 7:30 p.m., 8 p.m. on Thursday nights, just to have some fun, talk a little ball. And you guys can ask me any question you want, and I'll answer it live on air. And then, of course, here on the audio side, you can find this podcast on any streaming platform that you get your podcast from: Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. But this was a lot of fun on a Scenario Sunday, just going through teams 1 through 4. Next week, we'll do teams 5 through 8, next Sunday, that is. And we'll just keep going down the list until we get to the 2022 NFL Draft. So this has been the Cover One NFL Draft Podcast. If you guys want more from me, you can find me on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft for more. But until next time, this is Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast.